What was your worst sleepover experience during your childhood? Not safe for work. Viewer discretion is advised. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Had my first ever sleepover with my best friend in the first grade. Things at night were awesome. When I woke up the next morning, everyone at his house was super distant, and they called my mom to get rid of me ASAP. His father had had an aneurysm that night and passed away. After everything settled, he and his mom moved away, and I never saw them again. I was invited to a birthday party in elementary. Everybody kept talking about the slumber party afterwards. I assumed I was also invited to the slumber party, so I brought my sleeping bag and pajamas. Turns out, nobody actually wanted me there. I cried in the host's room alone for an hour or so, then faked being sick and had my grandma come pick me up. My friend had a poster of the live-action Cat in the Hat in her room, and the thing scared me so bad at night that I couldn't fall asleep, and I just sat there on the floor the whole night. Friends decided to set up a mock game of Survivor based on the reality show, which turned out to be an excuse to vote out the friendly nobody likes first. Guess who was the friend nobody liked? My parents sent me to spend the night with my friend. When I got home the next day, my mom told me my dad moved out and they were getting a divorce. I didn't see my dad for 3 years. Girls' sleepover when I was in elementary for a friend's birthday. Had a great time laughing and telling scary stories before bed. Woke up the next morning with a fever and terrible nausea. Went home and I was only getting worse. I had a huge spot on my leg in between my ankle and knee, right in the middle. It was hot, puffy, and red. Went to the hospital, and turns out I was suffering from a really bad staph infection. The night before, we were playing on the stairs when I slipped and scraped my leg. The doctor initially thought I was bitten by a spider. The infection was spreading fast and was eating away at my flesh. I had a tunnel up to my kneecap that had to be packed with fresh gauze every day. Almost lost my leg. I'm pretty pale. I sat up during a sleepover with a bunch of girls and made one of them scream because she saw me in a mirror and thought I was a ghost. In a carpool from soccer practice with a teammate or classmate with whom I shared a lot of mutual friends. Her mom casually mentioned her upcoming birthday party. The girl angrily shouted at her mom and in front of other girls in the car, "Thanks for bringing it up, Mom. Now I have to invite me." I'm young, so when I got the invite, my mom makes me go. I don't remember too much about the party, except for when someone decided all us girls were going to relocate our sleeping bags from the basement to the upstairs living room to watch a movie. The birthday girl went down to grab everyone's sleeping bag. When she brought them all up and everyone was snuggled in, mine wasn't there. I went downstairs into the basement, and she had purposely left only mine down there. When I slept at a friend's, I went for a shit and blocked the toilet. His poor dad had to put on some rubber gloves and break up the monster turd. I felt so ashamed about it. One time, when I was a kid, I was visiting a friend's family. I'll call this friend Rob. One day, Rob and I were in the living room watching TV and snacking, and Rob accidentally drops a chip on the floor. It didn't make any mess whatsoever, and he picked it up. Rob's mom saw this immediately and aggressively picked him up by the collar, dragged him into a room a few feet away, shut the door, and immediately begins beating the life out of Rob over a chip. It was horrible. I do not think I've ever heard anyone screaming and crying in so much fear and pain in my entire life. I had absolutely no idea what to do. I just sat on the couch listening to the entire thing with my jaw dropped. After a while, she came out like everything was normal with Rob, who had a teary face. I had to continue the rest of my visit pretending like I wasn't super freaked out by that entire thing. I'm no longer in contact with Rob, and unfortunately I don't have any way of contacting him, but I imagine that was not the first or the final time that has happened to him, and I often wonder if he is okay now. That entire incident felt like a script, like a routine, the swiftness, her blank expression the entire time. This was their normal. This was one of my core memories, even though it happened in practically a blink of an eye. This was in 2009 or 2010, maybe so. I was only 9 years old. This new kid moved onto the street, and we became pretty good friends. We found ourselves playing video games way late at night, but I would always go home since I only lived a few houses down. One night, He asked me to spend the night, so we built a fort in his upstairs game room using the couch cushions and blankets. Everything was fine until around 1 a.m. Everyone at his house was sound asleep but me. I was laying there in my makeshift fort when I heard the sound of heels on tile walking down the hallway adjacent to where we set up the forts. I mean, it was distinct and loud to this day. I could not imagine it being something else. The weird thing about it was their house floor was carpet, so I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. I also didn't have a phone at this time, so I was peering into the darkness through a crack in my fort when the walking sound stopped. After a moment of silence, it sounded as if it was sprinting in my direction, so I quickly hid behind the cushions when something knocked over the whole fort. This woke my friend up and he blamed me for doing it. To this day, I've never gone back to his house to spend the night. Using a throwaway for this because it's so fucking embarrassing. I grew up with a girl a couple of doors down who I considered one of my best friends. When we were maybe 10 or 11, she had a birthday party sleepover and I was invited along with 6 other girls. We played games, did our hair, watched movies, and sang karaoke. Toward the end of the night, she told me in front of all the other girls that I couldn't sleep over because she could only have 6 friends there, something she hadn't mentioned until that point. I was crushed, but I packed up my sleeping bag and all the stuff I'd brought and prepared to walk home. On my way out, I passed another girl who was arriving late to the party with all her sleepover gear in hand. I walked home in the dark and didn't tell my mother what had happened. I played Monopoly by myself and pretended everyone else was there with me. My friend never apologized and I never said anything about it. My first encounter with a tiger mom, middle school. I was friends with 2 other girls. Girl 1 I went to school with and we hung out all the time. The other, girl 2, I met through this friend, but we got along really well when we got to see each other. We finally convinced girl 2's mom to let us 3 have a sleepover, but tiger mom decided it would be at her house for some unknown reason. Hence, the most awkward sleepover of my life. It began a Friday afternoon after school. My parents weren't available to take me, so Tiger Mom picked me up. Girl 2 was not with her. I had never met Tiger Mom before, and rumor had it she did not like me whatsoever, so it was already super awkward. We pick up Girl 2's younger sister from school, but Tiger Mom tells me she needs to speak to the principal. I was not to speak, move, or even breathe too loudly. Girl 2's little sister and I eventually exchanged some smiles, looks, and tried to whisper very quietly to each other, but Tiger Mom wasn't having it. She told me, only me, to be quiet or she was taking me home. I was snapped at again in the car on the way to the house because I didn't get the memo that I was supposed to be quiet the entire time. Girl 1 and 2 are at the house by the time the world's most awkwardly silent car ride finally ends. Tiger Mom glared daggers upon our very mild greeting to each other, and I only saw her once the rest of the evening. Girl 2 is constantly looking over her shoulder and trying to maintain our teenage girl fun to whispers and walking on eggshells. It was more stressful than fun, so I was relieved when it was time to lock ourselves in Girl 2's room for the night, where we were a little more free to talk and relax. Not too much though, as Girl 2 got a few sharp texts from Tiger Mom telling her to shut us up. How she even heard us, I don't know. She was across their large house and downstairs. We were ridiculously quiet for 3 teenagers having a sleepover. The next morning, my parents were ordered to pick me up as early as possible. Girl 1 was welcome to stay as she was an accepted regular, but I guess I was a terrible influence and was not to be seen ever again. I was so stressed out by Tiger Mom, I was happy to leave without breakfast. Didn't really ever get to see Girl 2 a whole lot since then though. Tiger Mom refused to let Girl 2 anywhere near me. I have no idea why she hated me so much, other than I was lower class and not raised religious. So yeah, worst sleepover that forced an end to an amazing friendship ever. It was my birthday party. I was around 10. I invited all my friends, about 4 of them. A couple hours into the sleepover, I found out the hard way that none of them liked me, and they had just come to my party to hang out with each other when they kept excluding me from everything, and they finally told me. I spent the whole night crying in my room, but at least they all had to sleep on the floor without blankets or pillows because they didn't know where to find them. Well, One sleepover, one of my friends figured out jacking off and had zero shame. Definitely jacked off in front of like 5 of us. In high school, I went to stay over with my buddy at one of his friend's houses, and it turned out that it wasn't really his friend, it was some dude from Xbox Live that lived in the same town, but was for sure older, had to have been in his 20s when we were 16. Smoked some kind of seed mix that he claimed had some kind of hallucinogenic property. I believed he called it Yopo. Anyways, honestly, not my worst night, but my mom would have fucking died if she knew what I was up to. LOL. Having a Mortal Kombat 2 tournament with my friends on Sega Genesis. I was on a winning streak, but suddenly I felt a rumbling in my stomach. Now Mortal Kombat 2 did not have any sort of pause feature. I knew I could hold it for just a few moments longer. Just had to KO my friend and I'd win. Right down to the wire. When he had about 1 hit of health left, it happened. I shit my pants. Fatality. Think it was around grade 3 or 4. I had a best friend with a big house and 2 parents who later divorced a couple years after. I'll say his dad was a huge garage dad, as in the guy had his own brand new fishing boat he cleaned every day in there. All his trophies, life relics, everything was in there. The floor of the garage was nicely carpeted, and legit, everything in there was spotless. Anytime I went over, his dad spent most of his waking hours in that garage. My friend, his brother, and I somehow got into a water battle with the garden hose super soakers. I can't really remember how or why it started, but as you can guess, we moved our battle into the garage and left the garden hose running inside. We must have left it running from lunchtime, and his dad didn't come home until 5 or 6. I'll never forget the absolute hysterical screams and wails my friends and his brother made to their mom, who was closing her eyes crying, begging for her to do something while their dad was dragging them into that garage. The screams and yelling from the dad inside the garage continued for the entire hour it took for my parents to pick me up. They were beaten so bad, I don't think my friend could sit down for a solid week. It was like 6 or 7 of us at a friend's house, hot summer night, so we're camping outside in sleeping bags. It's pretty late or early, and we've been fucking with each other all night, tossing little pebbles, running around, dragging each other around in sleeping bags, the usual. Well, I feel a nudge when drowsy and just wave it off. Then I feel a nudge inside of my sleeping bag, and immediately hear a squeaky screech. I scream, and everyone immediately pops up. I'm zipped up mummy-style sleeping bag, so when I stand, it's still wrapped, and so is the screeching in my bag. A quick-witted kid named Cade runs over and shakes my ass out of the bag, and a huge fucking bat flies out. I later harness this fear and become Batman. I was about 7. I went to a friend's place just as his dad got home after accidentally shooting and killing his friend. I was too scared to leave, and it was a big place, and I guess we kinda just kept out of his way. His screams of anguish kept me up all night. It was a dark night. So I was 11 and a quiet kid. I'd not yet come into my own, so my social skills were a bit weak, and I was overly shy with people I didn't know. This led to me only really making 1 or 2 close friends during my first year at comprehensive high school. One of these friends happened to have the same name as me, so we bonded pretty quickly due to teachers mixing us up a lot, etc. Anyway, we were becoming good friends. He invited me for a sleepover a few months later, and I agreed. I went over to his place, and we wandered around his town, got some snacks, bumped into a couple of other kids from our class. It was cool. Back at his place in the night, he declared that we were going to play a game of truth or dare. I mean, I'm 11 and a pretty innocent, sheltered kid, so to me, that was as innocent as playing tag, so I agreed. The rules were simple. Here are 6 pieces of paper each. Write 3 dares and 3 truth questions. Scrunch them up and chuck them in a jar. We'd then take turns to pull them out and answer to them. Sounds fun. Let's go. I pull out the first piece. It's one of my own, and it reads, "Who do you fancy in our year?" Mild. Look, I was an innocent kid, so this was the pinnacle of my gossip imagination. I told him, and that was that. His turn. He pulls out a piece, rolls his eyes, and says nonchalantly, "I knew I'd get this one." He drops the paper down so I can read it. It's one of his own. It reads, "Shove pen up your ass." Time stood still for that moment. I didn't have a fucking clue how to process it. Of all the possibilities, he chose shoving a pen up one's asshole as one of 3 dares at the age of 11. I was still processing the paper with a little frown and a tilt of my innocent head when I was about to have some brand new fucking information to process. Before I could react, he stood up, grabbed the pen we'd used to write the dares, bent forward, and just stuffed it on back there. He pulled a little face as he did it, but it just went straight in. We held some pretty awkward eye contact, him in a state of complete comfort, me in a state of borderline breakdown, before he casually pulled it back out with a subtle pop. He looked at the pen, and it was missing the lid. I was fucking mortified at seeing this, but he just rolled his eyes again, slipped the pen back up there, and rummaged around until it made a click. Then he pulled it back out complete, with its lid, and a nice big clump of shit firmly lodged on top of it. He then opened his attic window and, with a blank expression, flung the pen off into the woods like he'd done this a million times before. He then sat down and said, "Right, your turn." Fast forward to some years later. Turns out he was gay and wanted to initiate something with me, to which I didn't reciprocate nor acknowledge at the time. So yeah, damn sleepovers. Went to a sleepover for a cousin's birthday. There were 4 of our other cousins there. The oldest told a secret to all of the attendees about me. No one would tell me the secret. Someone finally caved after about 6 hours of torture and shitty treatment of me. Damn bumhanger was an accident. Thanks, anti-asshole, for talking about the procreation habits of my parents to your 9-year-old. Went to a friend's birthday party in 4th grade. About halfway through the night, we decided to play hide and seek. Maybe 30 to 45 minutes later, all I know was it was a long-ass time. I come out of my hiding place to find them others playing on the Wii in the living room. They'd forgotten about me and thought everyone was found, so they moved on to the next thing without me. I slept over my friend's house when I was like 7, and her dog had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and was whining at the door. Her mom woke up and went out and hit the dog with a pan. It was terrible, and I never slept over her house again because of that. We were 13, I would guess. Normally I would always stay at my friend's place, but this time we stayed at mine. My parents took us to the bar, which was something people did at the time. Well, my father decided to get blackout drunk, and us 2 13-year-olds were stuck in the bar from 8 p.m. until 1 a.m. It was getting pretty uncomfortable between the parents and even some of the other people in the bar, cause, well, kinda shitty to have a couple of 13-year-olds in a bar on a Friday night at 1 a.m. So, when my father got up to use the bathroom, my mom grabbed us and we ran out to the van. He came out screaming, threw a beer, and was banging on the van screaming all sorts of obscenities. Well, we got home, get some dinner finally, and my mom goes to bed. My friend and I decide to watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the living room, which I never got to use, but Dad is gone. Well, an hour later, he shows up, and he just sits on the couch and smokes pot until falling asleep an hour later. So we sneak off to my room, and my friend's parents picked us up to stay at his place. And that was the last time I ever had a friend.